As always, I would like to thank TrickStop for allowing us to meet and have these webinars monthly. I will share the results with you if you're interested. But this time the winner is very clear. And I thank you for this, because 2 months ago we had that situation when we repeated the polling twice or even 3 times maybe, and there was always a tie. So next time we will do a webinar on step-by-step guide on habit reversal training for hair pulling. So in that webinar, I will give you just a way to do habit reversal on your own. So it will be geared towards self-help. Now let's go to your questions. Let's start. No question, I'm just reporting audio problems. Well, I hope you were able to hear me, because my microphone doesn't appear to be muted, and there are enough questions that don't mention me not being heard. So it may have been something from your side. You will receive a link to this webinar, so you can listen back those parts that you couldn't hear well. I'm sorry. Hello, Vladimir. Thank you for these webinars. They are the most instructive thing about Trick I have found. Well, thank you for the compliment, and I'm glad that you find them useful. They help me understand the why behind pulling, understand more myself. You helped me stop pulling for 3 months, but now I'm on a collapse period. Do you think the fact that I will try again and again will help reduce the pulling cycle? Is therapy unavoidable? Can we go to therapy for treating causes of tricks, such as perfectionism, emotions, management, avoidance, and so on, instead of saying I have to get rid of trick itself? As here in Tunisia, I didn't find a good therapist for treating trick. So it is indeed hard to find therapists for treating trick everywhere. So Tunisia is not alone there. For whatever reason, my colleagues tend to be very lazy to learn how to treat trick, and it shouldn't be that way, and yet it is. I don't know what to say. So if you're experiencing a relapse, I think the best thing that you can do is first implement all the strategies that have worked before. So go back to if you've done habit reversal training, go back to that and then reinstall those strategies immediately. So what I ended with here is what you need most now, which is kindness. So just be nice to yourself, try to minimize damage as much as possible, try to restore emotional balance, do some grounding, mindfulness, breathing, whatever will help you. Eat the food you like, spoil yourself a little bit. Then once all these emotions go away, and once you feel stable again, go over the period of relapse and try to identify what the causes were, and then work on preventing those from happening again. Or if there's if there are things that are cyclical, try to devise a strategy so that you're ready in advance. Because the only thing that we can do when we experience a relapse is just to learn to do better. Everything else is a waste of time. Judging yourself really just no purpose at all. When it comes to the causes of tricks, those that you listed here, perfectionism, managing emotions, avoidance, and so on, you absolutely should work on all of those. Yes. Managing emotions is really a matter of technique. So there are skills that you can learn. Avoidance can be dealt with by developing self-compassion, cultivating mindfulness. Just by learning how to regulate emotions, you can minimize the need for avoidance and so on. You can gradually expose yourself to the situations that you avoid. Exposure therapy, we know, is not the most, it's not the peak of psychological sophistication, but it does work. So you can do all of these things. Perfectionism is a very complex pattern of thoughts and actions and like psychological development, and it is something that you could work on in therapy. And I think every therapist on planet Earth should be able to work with it. Just keep in mind that it is something that will take time, since it tends to be trait-like almost. And don't lose hope. What's the Facebook group name? I believe the name of the group is trickstop.com, but let me verify this for you for a second, and then I will be able to give you clear instruction. As 1 second. I've registered on, because I really don't like Facebook or social media in general, but I registered on Facebook so that from time to time I can check the groups. I want to at least stop by once a week to the group and see if there are any questions that I could be answering. So the group is called trickstop.com. Yeah, it's a private group and you have to request access, which is really good because it means it will be a troll-free zone. So I like the idea. I'm actually quite excited about the group, excited enough to register on Facebook. You don't know exactly the resistance I feel, but I think it's a good idea to have a community that is safe, private, and also that where you can share your experiences and where you don't have a lot of outside interference, because we have a forum, but I don't think the forum is as good. I'm really excited, and I think we should work more on community building as a company in general. In older types of therapy, you would go over the trauma over and over again as a way to supposedly purge this from your mind. I love CBT because I don't have to dwell on my trauma. Is there a way to do acceptance and commitment therapy without focusing on trauma? So I don't know like exactly all the kinds of therapy that you've tried, because there are just so many of them. But even in those very intense therapies like psychoanalysis, the goal is never to dwell on the trauma, because you just re-traumatize yourself. That I don't see much point to that. But accepting that a trauma will have echoes in your life is, I think, necessary, because then you can deal with these echoes. That has to do with acceptance. If you go through acceptance and commitment therapy with someone, or I think any kind of modern therapy, almost, let me not generalize because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't know about, but most therapies that I know of will not make you relive your trauma over and over again, as that is just causing unnecessary suffering. You tell your story once and then you work on it in a constructive way. Especially when it comes to complex trauma, you're also able to work on specific aspects. But when it comes to, let me shorten this without going into trauma therapy theory, when it comes to acceptance and commitment therapy, you will learn how to deal with any memories that come about, but without actually dwelling on them. Just accepting that a memory has arisen and letting it go. That is essentially the shortest possible way that I can explain how it works. Over time, it has this effect that you will have fewer flashbacks and fewer intense reactions because you don't fuel them with additional emotional energy. Because memories are kind of, when we repeat them over and over again, it's almost like we charge them with emotion in some way. And in acceptance and commitment therapy, in constructivism, in all types of mindfulness, we learn to deal with these things in a way that we don't give them additional power, because they already have far too much of it. Do you find this approach helpful or effective with younger kids, for example, 8 years old, or does it require more awareness than their developmental stage allows? How would you use this with that young of an age? Bill, this is a good question. And I think there are many parts of acceptance and commitment therapy that are really not appropriate for younger kids. So someone who is 8 years old, to develop, metacognition is really, maybe if you're dealing with even if you're dealing with a genius, they probably still don't have the ability for abstract thinking. So if someone is 12, 13, maybe there's some point to teaching them diffusion, because if things go right, they should be able to start developing that capacity. But at the age of 8, no. On the other hand, you can teach your child all kinds of mindfulness. There are whole books devoted to teaching kids different mindfulness practices, some of which are quite creative and easy to use. You can teach your child other behavioral techniques like breathing exercises. And because next time we will be talking about habit reversal training, I suggest you tune in, and I will give you step-by-step instructions on how to apply it. And habit reversal is entirely applicable to children. So for an 8-year-old, habit reversal training is perfectly suitable and effective, which we know from previous studies. I have written "You matter" on my mirror to remind myself that I have value no matter how I look or what I see in the mirror. Is this a bad affirmation? No, I don't. Well, that depends. When you read the affirmation, how do you react to it? That's all that matters in the end. Um, for example, what I use, I guess it's not an affirmation, but I use it as an affirmation sometimes, is I usually, when I end my meditation practice is rather simple these days. I just sit there and focus on whatever arises in my awareness. It's what they call open awareness, or I focus on my breath. But the last 10 minutes or so of my practice, I usually practice one of the Brahma Viharas. Without going into details, one of them is compassion. And so there are certain phrases that I reflect on. And over the years, I've learned that even outside of meditation, if I just tell myself, may you be free from suffering, that this calms me down. It's like my Xanax. So that's what I use. And the reason why I use it outside of meditation as well is precisely because of the effect it has on me. So if "You matter" empowers you, and if it makes you feel good and it doesn't cause any resistance inside of you, then it's a good affirmation. My trouble with affirmations and positive psychology in general is not that they never work or that there's no space for them. As a constructivist, I'm a very pragmatic person. Like, if it works, do it. Like, if there's no harm in it, why not? The thing is that sometimes a lot of the positive psychology sort of verges on this kind of new age, but not even in a religious sense, but in this kind of vague magical thinking sense. Like, if you just think you're awesome, then you will be. And then people get lost in this kind of verbiage without actually taking any constructive action. And change is always action oriented. That's for one thing. And the second thing is that it kind of crosses over into this toxic positivity where you only focus on what's good. And as you know, as you can tell by my name, I'm Eastern European. I'm grumpy, morose, and pessimistic. And I really don't do well with people who only want awesome things, because life is not only awesome. And when you only focus on this kind of wonderful, rosy, unicorny kind of aspect of life, you're actually reinforcing avoidance mechanisms. So you are reinforcing the very pathology that you're supposed to be curing. That is my problem with it. But if you use it correctly, and if it works, and if it doesn't cause any resistance within you, if it doesn't make you avoid things, "You matter" can be very empowering. I mean, just think Black Lives Matter, for example. That's one very empowering slogan. I wouldn't call it a fake affirmation. It is a very, very empowering thing. So if "You matter" empowers you, then go for it. Write it on the mirror. Why not? Sure. Just make sure to not shove these things down your throat if you feel resistance to them. That's the whole point. What do you think about people who accept lifetime trick as a part of them? My sister doesn't believe that she can improve or heal from trick. How can I change her mind? Thank you. I wouldn't try to change her mind at all. But then this is my constructivist nature talking. I'm not in the business of telling people what they should be thinking, because it's their life. And also, when you try to change people's minds and they're not ready for their mind to be changed, then they just tend to kind of fortify their dysfunctional beliefs. The best thing you can do is set an example for her. And when she sees an example, then she will have empirical evidence that change is possible. And it does happen. I have 2 or 3 clients currently who struggle with BFRBs in general, who came to therapy with the exact same idea that your sister has, which is, I can't be changed. And then they come to therapy and say, well, I came here because this is my last resource, but I don't think I can change. And then they will stay in that mindset for months and months and months. And then they will notice small movements which will kind of edge them towards believing in change. And then there will come a point where they will be ready to change. but don't try to argue with them. It's arguing about this is kind of like arguing about politics with people. Like, it's maybe fun to debate things, but when has anyone ever changed their political beliefs because someone gave them a rational argument? Like, the reason why I showed you those studies about acceptance and commitment therapy is so that you know that it works. But if there is a person that says no, acceptance and commitment therapy doesn't work because I say so, well, I don't think these studies would change their mind. That's the point. It's not about truth, it's about being open to hearing something different. So the best thing that you can do for your sister is give her an example. I had about a year and a half of therapy, and I'm not able to have any help for an uncertain time. What do you suggest I do to help myself? I have CPTD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and trichotillomania. So I'm not sure whether you mean sort of making yourself feel safe in certain anxiety-inducing situations, because if that's what you mean, then I think the first thing that you should do is just arm yourself with practical techniques. Uh, as I said, mindfulness is kind of a touchy topic when it comes to PTSD. There's a book about it. It's somewhere there. I can tell you. I can, if you email me, I will send you a reference. There are two books actually on mindfulness and PTSD. So that's one thing. But you can also learn a lot of anchoring techniques or a lot of grounding techniques. You can find a comfort object, like, like the kids when they have those transitional objects. There are many ways that you can do that. The idea is that you have to find safety somewhere inside. Grounding is my preferred thing for mild situations, but when you're extremely triggered, what I usually do is I advise people to do breathing exercises, because in 3 or 4 minutes, if done properly, a breathing exercise can significantly reduce arousal. So what you need is just these very, very practical tools. I think acceptance and commitment therapy in this sense may be beneficial in the long run, but you need these practical tools as well. I think in one of the previous webinars, I shared a guided exercise for anxiety in those acute situations when people feel panicked. And I got a lot of decent feedback from it, so I can share that with you as well. If you email me, I will send you a guided link to the MP3 file that you can download. So that's something that you can do. How do we let researchers know that we're willing to participate in programs, as in the 3 papers you presented on acceptance and commitment therapy? Well, that's a good question. Spam them, send them emails, torture them, don't let them sleep. Just kidding. You don't have to resort to torture, but everything else is fine. I'm actually taking some proactive steps with this myself currently. I work as a clinician, so I don't have my own clinic. I'm a therapist who works for myself, and I really like that. But what I'm doing is that I'm trying to reach out to certain research teams who might be interested in using our platform as a way to do research, because we have a huge base of clients. Actually, we are the biggest platform for body-focused repetitive behaviors online. And I think they could have very good samples if they're willing to test internet-based interventions. So I will do my contribution to that as far as I possibly can. But just email them, let them know that you're, for example, if there's a research center near you, see if they have a center that deals with OCD or BFRBs, and just email them and then let them know that you would be willing to participate in a study. They will get back to you, because subjects for these studies are not easy to find. Any tips on dissociation and trick? Oh, there are no tips for that. Dissociation is a serious thing that requires therapy. So I can propose this as a topic, and then we can have a whole webinar on the subject, because I think it's quite important. But there's nothing that I can say in 1 or 2 sentences. I'm really sorry. It's just that it is a very complex subject. So dissociation, kind of like trick, is a mechanism of avoidance, of removing ourselves from our emotions, except the dissociation is kind of level up from hair pulling. essentially, in the long run, what I would do in therapy after having heard your story and understood all the nuances of it, I would find a way to kind of slowly connect you to the least intense of your emotions in live therapy, and then slowly generalize it to the rest of your life. But this is something that has to be approached very slowly and with care, because the goal is not to overwhelm you. And sometimes when you stop dissociating, what comes out is like a flood of emotions. So it has to be done very, very slowly. I've tried journaling several times, but I always give up. How should I go about doing this? And what do I journal about? Do I journal only when I pull? So if you want to track your pulling, you can install the app that we have. Actually, here on the right, you have a screenshot from the app. And now I've realized that I forgot to change the screen, because you have my email here on the left and you have a discount code here on the right. So you can install the app, it's called TrickStop, and then you can only log in pulling. And once in a while, you can print out a PDF from the app and then analyze the data. But that is not what I meant when I was talking about journaling. When I was talking about journaling, I meant sort of how do you, let's say you want to work on the observing self, or you want to work on cognitive diffusion. You can journal about the difficult thoughts that you had during the day, and then you can journal about what you did well. So you can journal about the examples where you successfully detached yourself from the thoughts, where you diffused them well. And then you can write down those thoughts that were kind of challenging for you. And then every once in a while, let's say once a month, you review the journal and see what you wrote down and see what are the themes that repeat themselves, so that you can identify what's the overarching pattern for those thoughts that are difficult to diffuse. And then you can come up with a better strategy. That is what I meant. I should also probably propose I always said that if I ever write a book about self-help book about BFRBs, it will be about journaling, because I think it's quite helpful, but I agree it is difficult to establish that as a routine. So maybe try finding an accountability partner as well. And then you can agree on what to journal about and then exchange information with each other, because that provides motivation. Thank you very much for the webinar. You're welcome. I think anyone would benefit from these. I find these extremely helpful and look forward to trying them. Yeah, I agree with you. I think to me, there is a book by Stephen Hayes, and now that I need a title, I can't think of it, but I have it on my Kindle, so I'm going to check right now. There is a book that he wrote, which is very accessible, and it's kind of acceptance and commitment therapy for, for life in general. And it's quite a good book, very easy to read and easy to digest. Just give me a second, because I have far too many books on my Kindle, and it's been a while since I last opened that book. Okay, so it's called A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Towards What Matters. So this is maybe a good starting point if you actually want to implement acceptance and commitment therapy. I mean, he made the whole thing, so he's certainly bound to present it better than I will. And it's also a very easy to read book. Is there some sort of a screener to help you figure out what kind of therapy is best for you, habit reversal versus acceptance and commitment therapy? I'm afraid not. So in TrickStop, we do both, and then you'll simply sort of over the course of the treatment, you'll see what works for you better, and then you'll continue using this. Sometimes it's the combination of both. Maybe you can think of it like this. I would advise you to first try habit reversal, because it is simple and its effects are faster, because in only a couple of weeks you are already implementing competing responses, and then implement acceptance and commitment therapy. And also, these two approaches are not at all incompatible. TrickStop combines both of them, and we even have studies. I mean, when I say we, I mean like the community in general. We have studies to show that these two can be combined very well. Some studies show that the effect is the same, whichever one you use. Some other studies show that there is like a synergistic effect between the two. So you can actually do both. But habit reversal might be a better place to start, because habit reversal has that awareness training stage that we will be talking about next month, where you get to learn about pulling. So it helps with acceptance a lot. And it helps you get to know a part of what you're avoiding, helps you get to know your thoughts and your feelings. So habit reversal is definitely the first one you should try. I've had forms of trick for over 60 years. I presently do not pull, yet have compulsion to twist my hair or rub tender scalp spots. I'm 80 years old and really beat myself about this and cannot seem to stop. I have been free of this for periods of 20 years, the most recent 15 years till my husband got sick and died. First of all, I'm really sorry to hear about your husband, and 15 years without pulling is excellent. I mean, if it took something so intense as sickness and death to trigger a relapse, I think you've done a remarkable job. Now, if you have a compulsion to twist your hair or rub certain parts of your scalp, I call that in my mind pre-pulling behavior. So sometimes that can be like a sign that there might be a relapse around the corner. Maybe when this intensifies, you want to use some stimulus control techniques like wearing finger covers or gloves. A lot of people don't like these, but they are very useful because they ruin the whole sensory aspect of touching the hairs. Like if you just use latex finger covers and try to touch your hair, you won't be able to tell the texture apart. So you will lose the incentive to do that after a while. So you can use that in certain periods of let's say a month or two, and it should kind of decondition you from doing that. But periods of 15 or 20 years without pulling, that is really excellent. I mean, in my mind, that's not even a relapse. That's really incredible. Congratulations. Thank you for a wonderful webinar. You're welcome. I meditate daily and practice mindfulness. The worst moment for me is when I'm on the phone. My attention slips, but I'm working at ways of occupying my hands and body checking, playing with a comb, the pen, doing stupid things like silly drawing. I use bounding balls. Yeah, I love them too. I travel with them and I love to play with them, but if they ever fall on your leg, may God help you. I have ones made of steel, so they look cool, but they hurt. Sharing a joke, making faces, flicking my fingers, then explain to others why I choose to do this. I think it's really good that you explain this to others, because shame is one topic that never gets voted up, and it's been proposed time and time again. But I think sort of sharing your experience with other people can be very liberating, and it can also be a great filter as to who is actually your friend and who isn't. So if someone doesn't want to support you or understand you, maybe they should not be in your inner circle. So sharing it is amazing. By putting it out there, you're taking away a lot of the power that trick has. So that's excellent. And that's also very difficult. When it comes to using your phone, perhaps you can try paying attention to what is it that you do on your phone when that happens, because using our cell phones at this point is kind of inevitable. You can't really not use a cell phone ever. But if it's scrolling through Instagram, maybe you can limit your Instagram time or not have it. It's not a source of mental wellness in my experience. Or maybe try to find, my point is just see what is it on the phone specifically that triggers you, because probably it's not all of it. And you can also just sit on your other hand. That's a useful thing to do. My partner is the only one who knows about my pulling, and he's very supportive, but I struggle to bring up the topic when I do pull. I would like him to be that person I check up with, like you suggested, but I'm not sure what exactly I'm supposed to talk about. Well, first of all, I think sharing when you pull is very important. But before you do that, think about the kind of response you need. So what do you need him to do and how he can alleviate your suffering in the moment? This is very important because even well-intentioned people will sometimes react in a way that's not very helpful for us. So it's important for you to know what is it that you need before you actually approach him. Then the second thing to do is to have him become the person that you can call or reach out to when the urge to pull is very strong. Especially if you have pulling trances, basically the only way to stop those is to have someone yank you out of them. He can be that person. It doesn't have to be, I will pull. You can have like a code word that you say. He can hold your hand. That's a very simple intervention, and it might prevent you from pulling. So that's something that you can do. You can also set daily and weekly goals. And when I say this, I don't mean like not pull for a week immediately, but let's say he can do something nice for you if you have a pull-free day, or if you should track your pulling using our app or in whatever other way. You can get a reward or do something nice with him when you reduce your pulling 10% every week. 10% doesn't seem like a lot, but if you think about it, in 2 months, that means 80% reduction. So that is quite a lot in a short period of time. So set goals like this. And then he can be your go-to person 5 minutes at the end of every day, where you can tell him what you struggled with and what you did well. That's a start. And then you will see sort of how your needs change and how his role can also change. Maybe this is also something that I can add to the list of topics that we can talk about, sort of how to create accountability partners. Hi, thank you so much. I have pulled for about 30 years. I have tried so many things to stop and have felt like a huge failure. I really feel hopeful learning about experiential avoidance. Pulling has helped me avoid sad or frustrating emotions that seem too overwhelming. Do you think journaling would be a good first step for me? I don't know anything about mindfulness practice. So starting mindfulness practice is, you can learn a lot about mindfulness online. And one of my, as you can see, I like to make resolutions, because then when I make one, I feel obligated to follow up. One of the things that I want to do is to create an introductory course for mindfulness and then just upload it to YouTube for people to use for free, so that they can, and something that would be tailored specifically to BFRBs, but I don't think I will be able to do that in at least a month or two. So don't wait. I will share it with everyone when I do it, but I don't think I will be able to have time to do it before. But you can buy a book about mindfulness, one that's very easy to read and a lot of fun, is called Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He has a very nice way of writing, and it's a rather concise book, which cannot be said of his other books. So this one is a good introduction to mindfulness. Journaling is always a very good thing to do. You don't have to journal every day even, although it is good to make a habit out of it. But you can journal in the moment when you feel a frustrating emotion. Just getting that out on the page helps you create that distance that we talked about. So it helps you diffuse those emotions. And journaling weekly would also help to sort of to go back and analyze your week. But when you journal, it's very important not to focus only on the problem, because we don't want to skew your perception only to what you're doing bad. That's not the point. So you always need to balance it out. The way that I like to phrase it is that you write about what you did well in terms of handling difficult situations or difficult emotions, and then where you can do better. So this is one way to have a positive spin, but a positive spin that's not toxic. So we don't ignore that you maybe didn't do everything well, but we frame it in a way that's proactive. Because writing, I was a Dear Diary, I was a failure this week is not something that will give you a strategy to move forward. But saying stuff like, I handled my boss very well and managed to calm myself down. On the other hand, when I had an argument with my partner, I pulled, then you know that, let's say, conflicts are an area for you to work on. And then you can find practical things. You can Google conflict resolution, mediation, assertive communication, find different tools to deal with it. So whatever the creepy sound is, hopefully it's not ghosts. And I don't know if anyone heard that. Anyways, so that would be one way that you can journal. So what I did well today and what I can do better. That's one way to approach it. And if you do practice, and you can also, so that's one thing. The second thing, when you feel overwhelmed by emotion, just get a piece of paper and write everything down, or just type it on your keyboard. That is really helpful. And don't think if it makes sense or anything, just write as much as you can. And then the third thing that you can do is, if you develop a mindfulness practice, take like maybe a minute or two just to write down what the major theme of your thoughts was, for example, during mindfulness. It's a nice self-psychoanalysis, let's say. Would habit reversal work for a 14-year-old? Yes, it absolutely would, providing that the 14-year-old wants help, yes. Do you recommend getting haircuts as a new start if you've relapsed a lot? That actually has helped a number of my clients. Some of them have shaved their heads, and I'm talking about female clients, not male clients. And that was both empowering, and it really did help them, because it gave them a window until hair grew back to work on emotional regulation and more fundamental stuff like diffusing thoughts and so on. So that is a strategy if you feel comfortable with it. This is my first webinar with you, and now I'm interested in the next steps. Do you offer online therapy for trichotillomania using these techniques? So this is, I mean, I have my own practice, but I have these webinars thanks to TrickStop. So the right address for you would not be my private practice, it would be TrickStop. It's a program that's based on these techniques, among others. Actually, if you attend the next webinar, you will have a good idea. When you merge these two together, you will have a good idea about how TrickStop works. So maybe that would be a good thing for you to do. Everyone who works for us at TrickStop has experience with BFRBs. We don't employ therapists who don't know how to treat these conditions. I mean, the point is to offer a specialized service. I see that there are still about a dozen questions that I didn't get to, but we do have to stop here since we've been going on for almost 2 hours. I would like to thank you for sticking around, and hope to see you in November when we will be talking about habit reversal training. And if you have if you think one of the questions that I didn't answer was very important and cannot wait until next month, you have my email. I will respond by Friday. This is my new rule. If you email me after the webinar, I will try to get back to you by the end of the week. So have a pleasant evening and see you in November.